So, we'll step into a little bit of a ancient conversation here. This is there was a great scientist called Aryabhatta, I think was his name. I'm not sure when he was around, actually. It was definitely after Jesus, and maybe somewhere in the first few hundred ADs, 200 AD or 800 AD or something like that. Did you ever have to learn in school the trigonometry? Sine, cosine, tangent, all that stuff? He invented that. In Sanskrit it's ja, koja, and I don't know the rest. But that knowledge of that trigonometry came from a gentleman called Aryabhatta. Very brilliant man, very, very brilliant man, great mathematician, great scientist, many, many centuries ago, great astrologer. And that knowledge went from him to the Middle East during the golden age of Islam, when they were very liberal and very advanced in terms of their civilization. Meanwhile, the West was in the Dark Ages. And then after the West started to come out of that into the Renaissance from the Middle East, as the Middle East in a sense was, anyway, we won't have to go there. That knowledge, Aristotle and Aryabhatta and trigonometry and so many things, came west into Europe. And that's how we get it today, and we're still studying it in school. So the person who invented that, so that we all have to do that at school, his name is Aryabhatta, and he went through all these literatures to determine the dates, to try and figure out how old everything is and what happened when, and like that. He's a scientific mind. Now in the ancient world, how did they tell the date? Does anybody know? Any idea? Give a clue. The sun and the moon and the stars. John Lennon sang like that. We all shine on. The astrology is such that it's not that there's a pattern that sort of goes around every day. If you take the exact alignment of the different planets, sun and moon on today, even 10,000 years from now, if they saw, okay, the sun was here, the moon was here, they could trace it back and go, right, that was 2013, August 22nd. They could determine that by the placements of the planets. Because you got 9 planets, or 8, depending whatever people think. You got the sun and the moon, you've even got major stars, because they're all moving in their own way. If you can line up which ones are where, maybe 10 or 20 of them, you can find out any date. So in the ancient world, that's how they would do it. They would write down all the positions of the planets and the stars and the sun and the moon, and on that day, at such and such time, say Krishna was born, or this war happened, or this happened, blah blah blah, this eclipse, or whatever. That's how they would do it. So Aryabhatta went through all the astrological information in the Vedas to determine the times. And he found that most of the events of the Mahabharata, or the Bhagavad Gita, they were approximately 5,100 years ago from now, about 3000 BC. So now we're stepping back before that to an ancestor of Krishna. Krishna was around about 5,100 years ago, about 3000 BC or a little bit before. And his ancestor was named Yadu. And he was king of that whole South Asian situation. And as he was traveling one day, he came across a mendicant, not only just a mendicant, but a very special mendicant. He glowed with Brahma Tejas, with spiritual potency. And he was, unlike some mendicants, he was also very handsome and very learned and very sort of good looking. And in other words, some people become mendicants because they fail materially. So they go, oh, I lost everything, everything's gone, my wife left me because I'm a bum, and this and that. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to renounce it all and become a mendicant. That does happen. But it wasn't the case this time. This gentleman was actually extremely intelligent, very good looking, very charismatic, had everything there. But the king happened to see him wandering alone in the forest with no clothes and no society and no anything. So the king, having a strong spiritual interest, he approached this man. And one of the things that this gentleman talked about was letting go. So is it okay if I just read to you a little bit about that little conversation? Okay, we'll just start here. Maharaj Yadu once observed a certain Brahmin Avadut. Avadut means a person who's given up all sorts of, like they might wander naked, which is not usually okay for us. But they just do that. They've given up all social conventions, completely sort of just meditating on the Supreme. They've gone that Bhajanavandi path. Who appeared to be quite young and learned, wandering about fearlessly. Being himself most learned in spiritual science, the king took the opportunity and inquired from him as follows. Sri Yadu said, "O Brahmin, I see that you are not engaged in any practical religious activity, and yet you have acquired a most expert understanding of all things and all people within this world. Kindly tell me, sir, how did you acquire this extraordinary intelligence? And why are you traveling freely throughout the world, behaving as if you were a child?" Note also here that the king of that entire realm, when he approaches a holy person, he approaches with great respect and humility, with hands folded. It's nice behavior, gentle behavior. Generally, human beings work hard to cultivate religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and also knowledge of the soul. And their usual motive is to increase the duration of their lives, acquire fame, and enjoy material opulence. You, however, although capable, learned, expert, handsome, and most eloquent, are not engaged in doing anything, nor do you desire anything materially. Rather, you appear stupefied and maddened, as if you were a ghostly creature. Although all the people within the material world are burning in the great forest fire of lust and greed, you remain free and are not burned by that fire. You are just like an elephant who takes shelter from a forest fire by standing within the water of the Ganges. O Brahman, we see that you are devoid of any contact with material enjoyment, and that you are traveling alone, without any companions or family members. Therefore, because we are sincerely inquiring from you, please tell us the cause of the great ecstasy that you are feeling within yourself. If someone can actually, we have a tough time just giving up smoking or something, but or eating chocolate. But if someone can actually live without any external material enjoyments, it's very cold, it's very hot, this is India, there's no good food, maybe you're eating roots, or you're doing that kind of stuff, like the way Jesus would just wander and teach, and yet people can just see that you're ecstatic, you're obviously extremely happy. And that you might be able to do that for a day or two in some sort of just particularly jolly time. But to actually live your life like that, it requires, because everybody's seeking happiness, it's an artificial platform to just deny happiness. That won't last. Therefore, if you see somebody for a long period of time, they simply don't need external sources of pleasure. Therefore, the only conclusion, or a conclusion might be, that they are receiving that from within. So Yadu Maharaj, the King Yadu, he is seeing that in this Brahman. This Brahman is so ecstatic, so happy, so just glowing with life and pleasure, and yet completely devoid of all material enjoyments. So taking that clue, Maharaj Yadu, who is not a fool and is a spiritual practitioner himself, is now thinking, okay, this man, by good fortune, I have happened to come across a very advanced soul who's just wandering, that's the camera, who was wandering alone out in the forest. I don't know why Maharaj Yadu was out there, somehow or other he happened to be. So that's the situation. And now, this is also Lord Krishna speaking. He's speaking to his friend Uddhava. So now it sort of comes back to the narrator, Lord Krishna. The intelligent King Yadu, always respectful to the Brahmins, waited with bowed head as the Brahmin, pleased with the king's attitude, began to reply. The Brahmin said, My dear king, with my intelligence I have taken shelter of many gurus. Having gained transcendental understanding from them, I now wander about the earth in a liberated condition. Please listen as I describe them to you. O king, I have taken shelter of 24 gurus. These are far out gurus. Who are the following: the earth, air, sky, water, fire, moon, sun, pigeon and python, the sea, moth, honeybee, elephant, the honey thief, the deer, the fish, the prostitute Pingala, the kurara bird, and the child, the young girl, the arrow maker, the servant, spider, and wasp. So one clue we can derive here is that to accept a guru or to accept learning or wisdom from somebody is not always that kind of stereotypical, some old guy with a beard and you approach them and tribals or or whatever, in whatever different tradition, and start learning in some stereotyped way. Nor does it necessarily mean going to university and getting a philosophical degree or something like that.